welcome to the Future Ventures podcast on Scaling with Clarity. Today's guest is Mike Feinman, Managing Partner at Texas Business Brokers, one of the leading business brokerage firms in Texas, focused on lower mid-market and Main Street transaction. Mike has helped to facilitate the sale of tens of millions of dollars worth of businesses across industries, ranging from manufacturing and restaurants to service businesses and technology company. He has spent years helping founders navigate one of the most emotional and financially significant moments of their lives, selling the businesses they've built. Mike, welcome to the Future Ventures podcast. I'm super excited to have you on.
Thank you, Axel. I'm happy to be here.
So the way that we do this podcast is kind of like focused on three parts. Like one, focus on Mike and who is Mike and how did you come to do what you're doing now. Two, Texas Business Brokers, where was the idea born out of, like kind of like the origin story? And three, just kind of your perspective on what are you seeing across the industry and the market?
Great. Okay. Well, I guess me, I'm an old man. I'm 65. I've been in business for a long time in many different industries. I started at PepsiCo, specifically Taco Bell, and ran a bunch of restaurants and ultimately ran training and management development for the company and then customer service for Yum Brands, which owner of KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, 16 countries internationally. Back then, they may have more now, I don't know. And and I really enjoy what I do. I'm a father. I have 3 daughters. I have 4 grandchildren, and I make music and I help people make their dreams come true from a business perspective, and that's a big part of what I love to do. I guess in terms of how I got here, how Taco Bell or Texas Business Brokers became. Back in 2014, I decided to leave the kind of the private equity, publicly traded company world, decided to go off and venture on my own. And the day that 3 restaurants came on the market, I purchased them, or at least I went after them. And so I became a restaurateur. Well, I've been in restaurants pretty much my entire career, between restaurants and fitness, which you could talk about later, and then premium retail. But anyway, the broker that was representing the seller for the 3 restaurants worked at Pizza Hut when I worked at Taco Bell. And so we knew all the same people. We just didn't know each other, which was a bit odd. So we got to know each other, became good friends. I was teaching him how to play racquetball, trying to get him back in shape, and tennis. And one day he called me and said, "Let's meet for a cup of coffee to talk about something that has nothing to do with the restaurants." And so we met at Starbucks, and he said, "Hey, look, what are you going to do the other 4.5 days of the week?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, you're going to own 3 restaurants, and you're used to running, $700 million worth of business. What are you going to do?" And I said, I hadn't really thought about that. And so he said, "You should be a business broker." Now I see myself as more of an M&A advisor now than a business broker. But anyway, he started teaching me and helped me. Actually, I was having him look at all my due diligence that I was doing on the restaurants. And he was a bit conflicted because obviously he wanted to sell the business, but he was helping me through it because we saw things the same way. And anyway, I started working for him as a business broker. And one thing led to another. He ended up actually dying of mesothelioma, which is really, really sad. I was actually there the night before he died. He used to decommission ships in the Navy, and it got a bunch of that asbestos into his lungs, and it metastasized. But I kept the torch going, and I carried it and grew. At the time, I turned it into what I called Retail Growth Associates, which is really what I was focused on then, was helping companies grow either through acquisition or through consulting. And then that morphed into Texas Business Brokers, really became more than just Texas. Frankly, we do some things all over the country in states that we can. We're not commercial realtors, and there's, I don't know, 15 or so states that require that. But other than that, we're involved in sell side, exit planning. We're involved in buy side, either finding businesses or helping figure out what is the right kind of targets to go after. And then also, which really is a this year venture, which has been really, or growth, I should say, which has been very exciting. And then also we've delved into really business consulting, where
Hmm.
either it's strategic planning or it's, problem solving, et cetera. So there's been a lot of consulting going on this year, which is, I think I enjoy that most. And so here
Yeah,
we
yeah.
are. Yeah, here we are. I guess we could talk later about kind of what I'm seeing. We could target that a little bit because it's pretty wide open, that question.
Well, I mean, let's jump right into it and like, what's the hottest? Like, what are people looking for to buy? Like, what are the trends shaping the industry? Kind of what are you seeing across? And then we can talk about some kind of like the founder side and what they need to prepare for exit and stuff like that. But like, what is hot and what is not?
Yeah, there's a lot of new and emerging. I think what
Okay.
people have probably realized and maybe not completely, isolated is the amount of dynamicism there is now in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
I remember some years ago, everybody was saying, hey, things are going to happen a lot quicker. When you think about Moore's Law, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it was every 18 months, computer speed doubles and the price halves. And now Moore's Law is no longer applicable. It's a law called 10, 100,000, 10,000 every year. That's how quickly things are moving, at
Yeah.
least from a technological standpoint. Well, I would submit that really the environment is changing that fast too. I mean, we see it everywhere. So what's hot? I mean, the new emerging industries, there's, believe it or not, a lot of space support. I talked to a company yesterday that's focused on not building rockets, but providing services for rocket builders or people that are within the space
Mm-hmm.
exploration and
Mm-hmm.
leveraging industry. I also talked to a company this week that is looking at, making films by crowdsourcing. And not, I'm not
Okay.
talking about small films. I'm talking 50 to $100 million films, and providing those types of services for people to be able to pitch, almost like
Mm-hmm.
Shark Tank production ideas. I talked to a company that's talking about, portable power,
Yep.
battery. I would submit that battery technology is definitely slower than most other technologies, portable power.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a big opportunity to be able to grow it. Maybe it's been stymied because the oil industry doesn't want battery power to progress. There's a big case for that. I don't have any evidence, but I think that there's a big case of why that might be the case. But also I'm talking to a company that is doing a 360-degree support out of cellular. So companies
Mm-hmm.
can leverage this company to be able to do everything from merchant banking to social media to marketing. And and also wearable technology, I think, is pretty hot right now. There's a lot of utilizations for wearable technology, other than just telling you how many calories you're burning and how many steps you're taking. And
Yeah.
then, from a bricks and mortar standpoint, that's all shifting also. If you think about what's happening with, and what's happened with Amazon, and to be able to
Mm-hmm.
get things, and if you don't like it, immediately return it, no problem, no questions asked, and the original Zappos model. So
Yeah.
there's a lot that's hot, but it changes every day, every week, every month, every
Mm-hmm.
quarter, because the environment is just constantly changing right now, very, very quickly. You see it in the market.
Yeah. Are we entering a buyer's market, seller's market, or something more complicated? And is it like highly dependent upon the industry?
I think overall, we're probably in a buyer's market, and sellers are holding in
Hmm.
in a large part right now because they're really not sure. I mean, there are a lot of businesses that are getting hurt right now
Hmm.
with everything that's happening with the economy, or are projecting pain. Because if you think about, 550 diesel and, petroleum and how expensive that is right now, let alone gas, those are
Hmm.
going to have kind of tail effects that are going to take a long time. I mean, if you think about distribution, if you think about manufacturing, they use all those resources. And so I don't
Yeah.
know that, and then I don't know if tariffs have completely we've seen the full impact of that because it's such a moving target one day, yeah, to the
Yeah.
next. Yeah, so and then also, the industrial war complex. I think that that's a big unknown in terms of
Hmm.
if we are now in a war phase as a world. And if that's the case, then that's going to definitely impact a lot of industries. So I think right now people are a little bit wondering and watching, and a lot of sellers are saying, you know what, I think I'll wait. And some of them are being hurt or projected to be hurt, which
Hmm.
impacts a sale. And I think buyers are in a position to be able to say, look, cut your losses. I'll take it at this price now. And
Hmm.
so, I've not seen hard evidence that multiples have declined,
Yeah.
but I think certainly multiples, depending upon the industry, have hardened.
Yeah, what we're seeing across it's we're seeing a massive demand. Just over the last week or so, we've received half a dozen inquiries from private equity firms or other interested buyers for industrial heartland companies like fasteners, foundries, construction technology. And so I mean, of course, the flight of capital towards AI is continuing, but we're seeing some of this like moving away towards more as, asset intensive companies that provide some kind of this defensibility compared to like pure software or pure AI companies.
I think that's right. And I think part of that is onshoring, and
Hmm.
I don't think onshoring will ever decrease. I think that we've learned a hard lesson that for us to be competitive as a country, for us to grow on a long-term basis as a company, number one, we have to be, innovative in that we have to
Hmm.
come up with our own industries. Green is kind of subsided right now, but green was our own industry. We should own AI, we should own
Yeah.
automation, we should own robotics, all
Yeah.
these things that we should really take a leadership role in the world. We have the best minds and we need to leverage those minds. But at the same time, and it's definitely less expensive to go to Asia to get those things that you speak of or
Hmm.
wherever
Hmm.
else.
Hmm.
But it's really, not in our best interest, I think. I think that we have to build, and I'm not saying we should be isolationist, but I think that we need to build our own capabilities versus
Hmm.
creating a situation where we're largely contingent upon others. So, if we can build those hard goods here and we can do
Hmm.
it in a way that is internationally acceptable from an economic standpoint, then let's do that. I mean, you think about how America was built. I mean,
Hmm.
America was built initially through agriculture, right? And then ultimately ended up being manufacturing and then ended up being technology. You wondered what's next, and sometimes the future is the history. And maybe a strong base will be our ability to truly manufacture those things that are needed across the world. So I don't think it's a bad thing. And I think
Hmm.
that, and I think that, at the end of the day, the slope is going up towards, onshoring. And I think that's a big reason why that's happening.
That's interesting, and I'm not surprised. I mean, obviously, with Trump's election, he's been very pro America or America first, and kind of shaking up the U.S. Canada Mexico agreements and other trade agreements. So we are seeing that as well. I'm curious, like Texas is home base for you, even though you said that you operate in other states. What does the Texas business ecosystem get right compared to other regions? I mean, like at least from my vantage point, like living here in Canada but operating on a global basis, like the feedback we have or the impression we have is that Texas is this kind of like business mecca. It's a very business forward, business friendly environment.
Yeah, I know it is. And I've operated in many states, including California. And there's a lot of controls, a lot of stepping on your heels, nipping at your calves, and
Hmm.
and trying to stop you from doing things that really government shouldn't touch and shouldn't
Hmm.
have any way of controlling, and should let, I'm a capitalist. I think business should go on as,
Hmm.
let nature take its course. And
Hmm.
Texas does give you a lot more, I'm not going to say carte blanche, but a lot more
Hmm.
freedom in the
Hmm.
ability to be able to do stuff without someone saying, no, you can't do that because, 1% of the population has an issue with that.
Yeah.
1% of the population has an issue with that, then I should be able to make the choice as to whether or not I want to make that change for that 1%. but I shouldn't have that, what I call the vocal minority, driving control and limiting and limits.
Hmm.
And so in Texas, there's a lot less of that, and also obviously there's a lot less taxation. I mean, property taxes are probably a little bit higher, maybe, but not high. But there is an income tax. There's not income tax. There's a franchise tax on businesses, which I still don't know exactly. I probably ought to research it
Hmm.
as to what that is used for. But infrastructure and whatever. And it seems like everything is under construction constantly in terms of the highway system and
Hmm.
those types of things. But yeah, it's definitely an easier state to do commerce in.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, and in some ways, I mean, like everybody's talking about the need for um, a tax reform in the states, but in some ways, Texas is taxing the people that have the capital, right? Like if you are, yes, property tax is higher there, but you only pay property tax if you have a property. Whereas if there's no income tax, the people from the lower middle class keep more of the money. So in some ways, it should be more representative of how the progressive tax system in the U.S. should work.
Yeah, I think
Um,
so. And yeah, I think so. And actually one of my clients is from the UK, and that's a whole
mhm.
other story in terms of how much tax there is there.
Yeah.
It's a huge amount of
Oh, for
tax.
sure.
And yeah, the healthcare system, I've heard mixed reviews on the healthcare system in Canada. That's maybe for another edition. I'd love to learn more about that. But nonetheless, listen, I don't think any country is perfect, I don't think
Yeah.
any state is perfect. But yeah, it's just, like minimum wage as an example is a big question in the United States.
Hmm.
And I remember when minimum wage was $3.35 an hour.
Oh, wow.
And I
Okay.
remember when, student wage was 285. So at the end of the day, minimum wage was never a living wage. Minimum wage was a starter wage. And so
Hmm.
that's a whole other question. And thank God that minimum wage in Texas is still 7.75. But, I think in California now it's almost $15.
Hmm.
And oh,
Hmm.
by the way, minimum wage should be much higher in New York City than it should be in Waco, Texas.
Of course.
So making a state minimum wage and also getting off track of what minimum wage was originally for. So I
Hmm.
believe in principle-based government, and
Hmm.
let's get clear on what the principle is and what the philosophies are, and then everything else should follow within that. And if someone
Yeah.
gets out of bounds on those philosophies or those principles, I mean, it's just like any other type of influence strategy.
Hmm.
I come back to you and I say, Maxim, didn't you agree to this? And you say, well, yeah, I did agree to this at a high level. Well, then doesn't this fall into that? You say, yeah, actually it does. Good point.
Yeah.
And so the first
Yeah. Yeah.
step is let's get clear on what our principles and our philosophy are, and then everything else I think falls into place.
Yeah. No, I hear you. What I move into kind of like you said that you've moved into instead of focusing on business broking, like into more of M&A advisory. So questions for you there. Why do so many businesses never actually transact? Kind of like what separates a good business from a sellable business? What's your perspective? What are you seeing on the front lines?
Yeah, and I think if there was any thread in what we're talking about today, this would probably be it. You know, it's important when you're dealing with either running a business or fixing a problem to take this philosophy of let's step back for a moment. What are
Hmm.
we solving for? And
Hmm.
business owners don't ask that question enough. Let's step back. We get into fixing things. And what I always try to do is I go, time out. Let's step back for a moment. What are we solving for? And
Hmm.
what that means is let's do a SWOT analysis, which is a key thing that I do with any business that I'm working with, and certainly for a new business. A SWOT analysis, we look at strengths and weaknesses that are internal that we can control, and we look at opportunities and threats that are external that we can take advantage of or protect ourselves from. And then let's come up with a 5-year vision. And the owner may say, yeah, but I want to sell in a year. Doesn't matter. What are you selling? You're selling the vision. You're selling
Hmm.
today and you're selling tomorrow. So you better be clear on it. So let's do a little reflecting on where do we want to be 5 years from now? We want to be
Yeah.
doing $80 million in sales. So we want to have a 25% margin and throwing $25 million to the EBITDA line. And then if we want to be doing it this way, right? So we come up with a specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound vision statement. Then we do reverse success planning. So let's look back and say, what did we do each year for the last 5 years to get here? And so
Mm-hmm.
we have 5 one-year milestones, and then we operationalize around the current year's milestone, which means we
Mm-hmm.
come up with strategies and tactics and tactical plans. So we're clear what we're going to do and who's going to do it. All of this is a living document, so it may change. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
continuously look at it and make sure that we're always stepping back and being clear of what we're solving for. But we'll have that full set of strategies and tactics for the current year to set the foundation to be able to hit that 5 year. And then finally, around all of this in like a squiggly circle is our enabling culture. And so
Mm-hmm.
be very clear about not only how we are going to behave, how we are going to work together to accomplish all of this, but also we're going to be very clear about what our target is for who we're going to find as we hire people, as we try to try to get people to even look at maybe working for us, and also, frankly, even clients of who we want to
Mm-hmm.
work with. We want to work with clients that we feel are in our sweet spot, that work within our culture. So at the end of the day, I just call that strategic planning, from vision all the way to enabling culture. And like
Mm-hmm.
I said, if there's any thread or any continuity in the conversation today, that's the biggest thing that we start off with. And that's what good companies, to answer your question, do. There's plenty of companies. I'm working with one company right now, and they said, well, we're failing. This is a failed business. And I said, it's not. I said, it was failed planning. You went into this eyes wide shut and not
Mm-hmm.
eyes wide open. And eyes wide open mean you go through that exercise that I talked about, and you're honest about it
Mm-hmm.
and direct about it. And so now what we're having to do is step back and do it again, or do it for the first time. And I always say, if I don't understand, I never have been able to understand why no one has enough time to do it right, but we always find enough time to do it over again later. And so that's a lot
Very
of the kind
true.
of hard, and that's a lot of the hard talk
Yeah.
that I have with, we have with each other, with the
Yeah.
people that I get to work with as what we call clients.
Yeah. I hear you. I mean, like, we rendered some of the same advice, like, slow down to speed up, like, do it right. Like, you're going to gain the speed and efficiencies later on, but kind of like continue down that train of thought. How early should a founder think about an exit, and kind of like what should be their process, as well as like what traps do founders fall into when thinking about valuations?
There's a book that is an old book, and this will give away my age. It's called Built to Last.
Okay.
Built to Last. And it talks about HP, and it talks about IBM and all these great companies back in the day that, they didn't build a 5 year plan. They built a 50 year plan.
Yep.
And I think that anybody who's starting a business should build out and should be thinking about when he's going to harvest, or she's going to harvest it.
Hmm.
Absolutely critical. And some people say, look, I'm 30 years old, I'm going to be doing this for the next, I love this, I'm excited, I'm going to be doing this for the next 30 years. And I just say, all right, so in your mind, and you got to pause when you ask these questions to yourself or to somebody else. In your mind, you just said 30 years.
Hmm.
What's going to happen in 30 years? Well, I'm not really thinking about it yet, but I'm asking you to think about it right now.
Yeah.
So in 30 years, are you going to sell and be done, and your kids and your grandkids and their grandkids, like who was it that said that Garth Brooks made more money than his grandkids kids could ever spend? Is that what your goal is? And think about it now, because the law of attraction will get you there. And now
Mhm.
let's work our way backwards. And I'm not saying we need to have 31-year milestones, but now it kind of adds a little bit more meat to the bone on your 5 year vision.
Hmm.
So, to answer your question, I think a founder should be thinking about it as soon as possible, because it
Hmm.
guides what they do. If someone says, I want to be free, then
Yeah.
my question is, then why are you right now involved in everything? Why are
Mm-hmm.
you involved in everything? Well, because that way I know it's done right. Well, how are you going to develop your people to do it right? So, and how are you going to isolate those higher order things that you should be
Yeah.
checking to make sure that all those other things happen? If I'm checking this, then I know all these other things are going to happen. If I'm checking all these other things, then I'm going to miss half of the other things because there's too many of them. But I have to be smart. I have to, really have the peripheral vision and the altitude
Yeah.
and the wisdom to be able to know as a leader, these are the things I should be focused on, not these things. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think from the very beginning, these are the kind of conversations that I have with founders. And if I'm working with a founder that I need to get them there, I mean, I just sold a $20 million manufacturing company that did they did circuit boards.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first started working with them 2.5 years prior to sale, the wife was constantly on the floor soldering, and the husband was involved in every single thing. And I said, someone's going to come in here and say, I'm going to spend $20 million, but I can't get rid of you because if you
Yeah.
leave, the thing falls apart, or I'm going to have an earn out that's
Human
going to
risk.
be 50%. And
Yeah.
so I got to get you to start delegating, and I call it develegating.
Yeah.
So if I
Yeah, I
delegate, I'm
agree.
just giving you something, but develegating, I'm developing you. So you get something
Yeah.
out of it too, right? And we talk about that, hey, I'm going to have you do this, but here's why. And here's what I want
Mm-hmm.
you to learn from it and how it's going to be better for you, whether you stay with us or not. It's going to build your capability. And it took 2 years because the first probably 6 months was getting
Yeah.
their head to the point where they felt like they really could let go. And then after that, it became a lot easier, which is putting systems and processes in place so that they knew what those higher
Yeah.
order things were as CEOs.
I mean, this is consistent. The top three the top three factors that we see, in terms of or the top three risk for an acquirer: key man risk or key woman, the key person risk, I guess. Um,
Yep.
Customer concentration risk and lack
Yep.
of scalable, repeatable processes and systems. Right? Like like
100%.
they want to buy businesses that are self-sufficient running. Like they may want to put an operator in place, but they want business that's self-sufficient, right?
Yeah.
That's what they're underwriting in essence. um but like today I had two conversations with two of our advisory clients, and the word trust came up repeatedly. And so one of them is a marketplace, the other one is something that they're building in health. But from your perspective, how much of a business sale is actually tied to financial model and numbers versus trust and narrative?
Well, it's really equal. I would think about it sequentially. The first step is financial.
Mm-hmm.
I should say that the first initial step is your gut in terms of trust,
Mm-hmm.
right? That I feel good about this seller, that I feel like they're, you know, good people, and I feel like they've got an honest, real business here. But I'm still going to trust and verify. This is what the buyers are saying. And then, but before I do that, I got to figure out the what. So now I'm going to go deep into the numbers, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to understand what the add backs and what EBITDA truly is, and the
Yeah.
trends and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and then I'm going to figure out what it's going to take for me to take this business over. And there's really three
Mm-hmm.
things. There's transition. There's in some cases training, and in some cases there's operating. And
Mm-hmm.
so, depending upon if I need level one, which is I just need you to tell me how to turn on the lights. I need you to introduce me to the suppliers and the customers, and I need you to introduce me to the people, the valuable people that are your second should be your second family, that are your employees. And then level two, I am going to need you to teach me how you do quotes, maybe, or how the quoting department does quotes or stuff like that. I don't need
Mm-hmm.
you to teach me how to solder a board and how to test a board using the circuit board,
Mm-hmm.
a company as an example, or maybe I do. So now that's a whole different thing in terms of how much trust I need. And then there's the third level, which is I need you, and within the third level there's levels, which is operating. One level of that operating is I need you to stick around for 6 months as CEO as we source
Mm-hmm.
someone to replace you.
Yeah.
And so I need to have a lot of trust for you. in you to be able to do that and to not be stuck in the mud, because we're going in here to grow this thing. And the reason why
Hmm.
we wanted it to be us freed up so we can operate it as board and CEO or chairman, and not as chief operating officer and having to run the day to day, is because of what you've done here, and I need to be freed up to do that. So maybe it's not all the way there, so
Hmm.
you're gonna need to stick around for a while, a lot more trust. Or in some cases, either I'm going to partner with you, which I had one company, it's a large remodeling company where the seller ended up staying. It happened at the last minute. The buyer and the
Yeah.
seller ended up really feeling comfortable with each other, and the seller
Amazing.
said, the buyer said, "I'd love for you to stay." And actually, I talked to him because I may sell it for him again, for them this time. And in fact, I was supposed to get all their books today,
Yeah.
which I haven't received yet. So after this call, I will be following up. But nonetheless, they're doing really well together, and so that's good. And so if they're going to stick around and either partner, or the seller is going to stick around and work for the company or operate the company, then that level of trust is going to be much higher on the right side of the
Yeah.
chart.
Yeah.
So. I always try to answer these kind of questions with facts versus with either wet finger
It-
in the air, or opinion, because I think whoever you are, whatever side you're on that, needs to know, well,
yeah.
why do you say that?
Exactly. Um, I mean, in this case, you provided an example where there was a lot of chemistry between a buyer and a seller, and they decided to just kind of partner up and work together. Have you seen cases where, um, like, what makes a founder difficult to buy from? Or have you seen cases where founders are emotionally unable to let go even when economics make sense? Kind of like when a founder can get out of their own ways.
Yeah, I think through the sales process. So we're talking about that phase, right? Because on this side of the phase, there's a lot of consulting and exit planning or improving the company, and
Hmm.
then you go through the sales process, and then there's all the post sales stuff. During the sales phase, I always say that the buyers and sellers, my objective is to have them sing "Kumbaya." Remember that song "Kumbaya"?
Yeah.
So everybody's singing that song. I don't even know where it came from, but I use it in my when I train new brokers. But buyers and sellers come together and they come apart. And our objective is to keep them all on the same page. And
Yep.
there's a lot of different techniques to do that. I have a lot of contracting and just a lot of different ways to make that happen. Even how you bring them together, when you bring them together. Sometimes things happen and you let it rest for a little while, even though they want to talk, or one of them has to talk to the other one to tell them. And
Yeah.
I'm like, we'll do that in 48 hours. Okay, sleep on it. So there's a lot of ways to get past that. There's natural ways where that happens. At the very beginning, they're all singing "Kumbaya." Buyers all excited, or the buyer group's very excited, and they're just meeting each other for the first time. It's a first date. They're both trying to impress each other.
Yep.
Sellers trying to impress the buyer how great it is, and buyers trying to impress the seller how capable they are to take the torch. And then you get the memo of understanding, or the letter of intent. Hoping the industry completely goes away from members of understanding, because I think they're a waste of time. Letters of intent
Hmm.
are much better and much more meaty. And so you get the letter of intent, and then they come apart. What? They want that? What? They said that? How could they believe that? Or how do they feel that? Or whatever.
Yeah.
And so now you're really working every which way you can from a facilitation standpoint to get everybody back on the island. And then we finally, and I can tell you that yesterday I had a $10 million deal that died at 10 a.m. and was back a lot. Seriously, died. It was over and was back on track. And we're finalizing the LOI today at 11:30 a.m.
Wow.
I'm talking about dead, like the
24 hours.
paddles didn't
Yeah.
work. Okay.
Wow.
So that's, you got to be live, you got to be on it. But then you start working through due diligence. And then you have the seller saying, they're asking for what? And so a big part of making sure that the sellers
Hmm.
have the emotional as well as the acumen from a financial standpoint to do a sale is preparing them prior to what's going to come. And
Hmm.
then you could say, Maxim, you remember I told you that they were going to ask for something like this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So let's just do it. Let's just do it. So then you get through due diligence and you have a couple of buyer seller calls or meetings, and everybody slowly comes back together again. Now everybody's singing Kumbaya. And then
Yeah.
you get the purchase agreement. And then you get lawyers involved and, and accountants and advisors sometimes. And,
Hmm.
so now I've got a lot more stakeholders that I'm having to sing Kumbaya with.
Hmm.
And I'm having to have these conversations and explain and get through indemnities and get through, and that wasn't on the LOI. Why are they bringing it up now? Well, it's a lower order thing. You wouldn't find that.
Yeah.
Going through that, and then you finally get them, and it's ready to be signed again. You have this, the purchase agreement is there, and now we're singing Kumbaya again. So I mean, that's the reality of what happens. And I think if you're looking for, those of you out in the audience that are looking for an M&A advisor, you really want an M&A advisor that it can explain to you what I just explained and give you
Yeah.
specific examples and methods that they utilize to,
Yeah.
to be a deal maker. I mean, there's a difference between being an M&A advisor and being a deal maker. And a deal
Yeah.
maker also has to come up with things that the lawyers go, I've never heard of that before, but that could work. That could work. And
Agreed.
that's the kind of crazy stuff. I mean, every single deal to a certain extent is a piece of clay that we have to
That's
form so that it ends up being everybody's one. The seller wins,
yeah.
the buyer wins, and we win.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, for sure. I couldn't agree more with you. And like, it's kind of reflecting in terms of what we're doing. Like, yeah, I'm a CPA, but a lot of the work that I do is change management work, right? Like, to your point,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
the more stakeholders you have, the more people you have to make sure they're aligned and singing Kumbaya, because without getting them aligned in terms of what you're trying to execute, deal doesn't happen. And to your point, like, time kills all deals. And so surprise the skill deal. So you want to be as prepared as possible to be executing with as little friction as possible. And so the earlier the
yeah,
founder starts, the better, the more likely is that the deal can close. But I wanted to shift gears a little bit and kind of get your
sure.
perspective. Why do some businesses, from your perspective, trade at maybe two to three times earnings versus others at 8, 10, 15? I mean, you have the Elon Musk company is trading at 120x, right? Like, what is your sense in terms of like why certain companies attract such a high premium on their earnings or on their business value?
Yeah, I think, obviously the easy answer is, oh, it's the industry. That's an easy answer. But I would use the word outlook at the
Hmm.
end of the day,
Or return.
outlook. So, and also margins. But if I'm looking as an example at let's just call it a wearable technology company, right?
Yeah.
So let's say I'm looking at a wearable technology company and they've created a technology that is expandable, that can do
Hmm.
many other things besides
Hmm.
calculate your steps and calculate
Hmm.
your calories burned and maybe your temperature of your body, things like that.
Hmm.
And so they've, again, I'll just use that as an example, that they've created something that can give you a lot more information. Maybe I throw it on my kid and then I know where my kid is at all times, or I throw it on
Hmm.
my elderly, my father who had dementia, who's no longer with us, who's here now everywhere, but fortunately, but I miss him. But when he had dementia, having something like that on him that would alarm me if he stepped outside of a radius, or so now what you're doing, and maybe potential, the definition of the word potential is just it ain't been done yet. Now you see
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
southern come out of me, it ain't been done yet, but that's potential, it ain't been done yet. And so
I
if
haven't heard any
now
y'alls.
yeah, well, I try to not go too far, over the line. But if it's potential, but it truly has the ability and it's protected. So now we're talking about outlook. And
Hmm.
so if I, and beauty's in the eye of the beholder as well.
Agreed.
Now, it'd be rare that I spend 120x on something. And probably those companies that are trading at 120x have a PE ratio of zero, of negative. So, at the end of the day, but if I was in the industry and I understood and had a 30-year plan
Hmm.
for what I could do with that, And then I
Mhm.
was really looking at the multiple, not over the current multiple, but I'm
Yeah.
looking at my expected multiple, which I
Yeah.
maybe I've started in, there's probably,
And no
forecasted
difference.
multiple. And maybe at that price, based on how I plan to use it and the diversification that I can add to it and the strategicness of me as a buyer, beauty in the
Hmm.
in the eye of the beholder, to me, the effective multiple is point 0.2.
Hmm. Hmm.
And now I take it to the board and I go to my board and I say, hey, by the way, this company, it's a point 0.2 multiple. It's crazy. They're paying us to buy it. And they're going to say, no, it's not. It's 120. And I'm going to say, okay, everybody sit down. Let's go. Let me walk you through this. So I think
Hmm.
that stuff's all happening behind the scenes for someone to buy something that's, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that aren't smart, but there's a lot of very, very smart people. And someone that's trading, hundreds of millions of dollars to buy something at 120x, I guarantee you there's a lot of meat behind the bone. And I guarantee you if you and I, now there's some shysters out there, we know that go
Hmm.
up there and do the presentation and somehow they have this attraction power, will believe anything you say. I've met people in my life, luminaries, that you understand why they are as successful as they are. They just got the mojo. You get up in front of them and you're going to do anything they tell you to do, and you don't know why. And I won't, but the broader part of the population, pitch people.
Yeah.
So hopefully that answers your question. But I always go to bricks and mortar. I want to know, give me the facts, nothing but the facts.
Hmm. Hmm. No, that makes sense. I know we're coming on time, Mike. W- um, what's the one thing every founder should understand about selling a business before they ever think about going to market?
That the buyer wants to pay less than the seller thinks it's worth, and an MA advisor is responsible uh,
Bridging.
uh, well, not only reaching, like I said earlier with the 120 multiple, reaching in a fact-based way that actually makes it obvious that you're getting an incredible deal at the
Yeah.
price
Yeah.
and in a way that's believable. So, but I think at the end of the day, that's nature.
Hmm.
Founder always feels like his company's worth much, much more, but you can't sell the company on potential because it hasn't been done yet. And if they buy
Yeah.
it on potential, then their back's against the wall. Oh, not many people will do that, and the banks won't do
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Okay. If you're buying a business today, what would you go after?
I don't want to buy a business right now. Um, seriously, excuse me. But personally, I'd go after actually some of the companies that I've heard about this week. I'd go after green space
Hmm.
because I think that green space by definition is looking to the future,
Hmm.
whereas people that are already operating right now, they're under a huge amount of risk because it's in the wood in terms of the way
Hmm.
that they're engineered, and there's only so much nimbleness. That some companies, the
Yeah.
scale of nimbleness is larger than others, but at the end of the
Yeah.
day, all of them have a smaller appetite for nimbleness or ability for nimbleness as
Yeah.
versus something that's brand new. So I'd go green. I'd go whiteboard green space.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Makes sense. Greenfield creation of new industry, creation of new platforms, new formats. Yeah, because it provides
Yeah,
novelty, but also it the competition is not as strong. Makes sense.
yep,
Mike, this has been fantastic. I really enjoyed
it
having
has.
you on the pod and getting you insights on kind of how you think about business.
Thank you. Great to be here. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Mike.